the manifesto. Thank you very much for your time. Good morning to you, madam.
Good morning. Good morning, all of you in the studio and to your listeners.
I hope you're well.
I am well, thank you.
Key issue, because I know you've been in government. How easy is it to get things done in government? So much so that the 25 a day, and these are loaded plans, 25 points within 120 days. I'm wondering if all those are attainable within the 120 days.
Thank you very much. First of all, as you know, our manifesto is about resetting the economy and creating prosperity for all. We have come out, or we are still in a very tough economy with very little fiscal space. And this economy has to be fixed, and someone has to do it. It's going to take a lot of hard work, a lot of expertise, and a lot of thinking to try and come up with solutions to resolve it. This is why the NDC is saying that their 2024 manifesto is not a manifesto of promises. It's a manifesto of action plans that will need to be taken to resolve some short-term problems, many medium-term problems, and, in fact, humongous long-term problems. We have a structural problem with our economy, and that's why any time we try to fix it, we have problems again and again. How many times has Ghana gone to the IMF? More than 18 times. So there is a need to do some fundamental work. The first 120 days of JDM's governance, starting from January 2025, will be where we will be putting plans in place. The frameworks that we have now come up with, we'll put them in place as per the action plans we've listed in the manifesto. So we'll be putting those frameworks in place. They will need laws, rules, and regulations to support them. All that will be put in place in order to implement these plans. So the plans will get rolled out by the end of year 1, year 2, and hopefully we start to see the benefits in the medium term to the long term. And I say hopefully because we all have to put our shoulder to the wheel to make this work. As you already know, the flagship policy is the 24-hour economy policy, which we are encouraging public and private sector to go into. This is where for one job, you will have 3 shifts and 3 people doing the 3 shifts. So immediately there's a multiplier effect. A job that was being done by one person from 8 to 5 will now be done by 2 more people at different shift times in the 24-hour. So these will need labor laws and so forth to support. It will also need the enabling environment, which will mean more infrastructure. If you recall, from 2014 to 2016, there was a spurt growth of infrastructure development in Ghana, after which we haven't seen that growth rate again in infrastructure development. We will continue that infrastructure growth development to make sure there's reliable electricity, reliable water supply, rails, road transportation that is reliable, ports and so forth to support the 24-hour economy. Therefore, it means that work must be done in the first 1 to 1.5 years in order for that plan to be executed. So the first 120 days will be filled with putting the frameworks in place, ensuring the enabling environment is there, the rules and regulations are there, so that the plans that we have listed will take off. Those plans are necessary plans to reset our economy, which is currently in a crisis.
And one of them, and coming to your area, is the proposal to hold a national economic dialogue.
Correct.
First, to discuss the two state of the economy, and secondly, to prepare a homegrown fiscal consolidation program. Is the old one still not fit for purpose?
No, because the situation has changed. So, as you rightly said, we will have the committee or the council. Then there will be forensic audits that will be done to ascertain the core problems. As of today, we are all feeling the symptoms of the crisis. We need to find out what the core problems are so that we can address them properly. And hopefully, a lot of those policies will be enshrined in our constitution going forward and within our national development plan, the 40-year plan that we set up before we left, so that as government is a continuum, subsequent governments will continue to implement what has been done and not to leave certain things behind. So yes, you are right. The president himself will chair that commission, and we will have forensic audits that will be done to make sure that we come up with the core problems. It's not for witch hunting, but to find out what the core problems are and get the correct solutions to deal with those problems. Because clearly, we don't have the fiscal space. Our debt is not sustainable as of today. In fact, we defaulted on international debt and technically defaulted on domestic debts as well. So we need to set up a debt management office that will engineer and bring us back to the stage where our debt is sustainable, where we can access the international market for capital, and where we can also bring some credence to the domestic debt market. That way, then we will have capital for the infrastructure that will be needed for our future growth and development. If you recall, when we left office, we were just coming out of an IMF program. And the results of that heavy lifting was felt in 2017 and 18 when we saw a massive growth rate to 8%. So a lot was done that gave good results in the early years of the Akufo-Addo governance time. And we will have to put that back because as of today, all the econometrics are trending south, and we'll have to do better for the nation Ghana.
Did I hear a debt management office?
Yes, a debt management office which has been attempted under this regime, but we will do it as was indicated by the IMF in the previous IMF program that we wanted to, that we were working with. So we need a debt management office that will treat debt properly. Now, if we had gone according to the way that we had started, where we set up the sinking fund, which is basically a debt service reserve account, and we put in over $200 million there. In fact, if you recall, we paid off the Kufuor Euro bond, and we were ready to make payments for other debts that were coming up for repayment. In fact, the subsequent government was able to make some of those payments out of the sinking fund, but then they did not replenish the sinking fund. And so other or subsequent debts were now not paid, and we entered into default as a nation, which should not have happened. In fact, if we were still in office, that would not have happened. So upon our return into governance, we will make sure that we return our debt situation to a sustainable stage so that Ghana can now access the capital markets, both internationally and domestic, to grow our infrastructure and to grow our economy and the GDP.
Is that also to say, because I hear you talk about debt sustainability too, because this government has already done the DDEP, they've dealt with the foreign bond holders and also our bilateral and multilateral.
They've done the restructuring, but it is only in the 2030s that restructuring will bring us to a normal level, to a breakpoint level. It is the restructuring that they've done. As we speak, our debt is still not sustainable. The restructuring has been done, and the results will happen 2033 onwards, not now. As we speak now, we have a crisis. We cannot access the capital markets. If you recall, last week or so, Cocobalt could not access the international markets for their revolving credit facility, and therefore they are going to have to do it internally. Although they played it as being something that they wanted to do internally. But we all know that it is a facility that has been the envy of many. It started many years ago when I was at Ashanti Goldfields, before Ashanti Goldfields even did its revolving credit facility. So that facility, to not be able to come online is not the best. But anyway, we'll see what Cocoa Board will do in the coming year. However, these are the manifestations of not being able to access financing from the international market. The debt restructuring has been done, but it doesn't mean that the debt has been restructured and Ghana is now at a debt sustainable level. It's not. It is yet to come.
Within the context of that, when you owe money, people expect that you raise a lot more revenue to be able to cover your debt servicing, among others. This government says one of the reasons you're seeing some of these taxes, e-levy, COVID levy, 10% levy on bedwinnings, among others, is to raise our debt threshold to a particular level to GDP. You are proposing fiscal consolidation. At the same time, you plan to scrap some of these taxes. How do you reconcile the two?
We plan to scrap those taxes that we've listed to release the burden or to take the burden off the ordinary Ghanaian. Many of them are consumption taxes, including the VAT and sales tax that was combined and made even higher. We are going to not scrap the VAT and sales tax, that we will re-engineer, but the others, the COVID levy and so forth, those we will scrap. They do not need to be there to place burden on Ghanaians. Now, tax revenue have many sources. Those are not our only sources. So we know how we'll focus on the other sources, ensure compliance, and bring in tax revenue. Now, government revenue is made up of tax revenue and non-tax revenue. We'll be focusing on non-tax revenue as well. So we'll review the Petroleum Revenue Management Act to ensure that that petroleum revenue is used properly. Under the last 8 years, petroleum revenue was used in a way that it was wasteful. But we will now make sure that it is used appropriately. If you recall, the stabilization fund, which we put in place, kicked in to help with the COVID time. But the two other funds, especially the annual budget fund, will be funded in a way that it will support the budget appropriately. There will also be the Give Me system, which should be there, but it's not being utilized properly to ensure control. Again, we will have the Natural Resource Management Act to manage the other natural resources that Ghana has, to ensure that the revenue from those also come in. So in terms of revenue, we have a plan to bring in revenue. Where we will be even more focused will be expenditure. Over the last 8 years, there's been reckless expenditure. Now, when you have a budget deficit, you have two ways that you can approach it, or even combined, either increase revenue or reduce cost. So whereas we will look for new sources of revenue, we will also reduce expenditure. All the excess, the inefficiencies, we will deal with all of that, including the corruption. And as JDM said when he launched the manifesto, oral Operation Return All Loot is going to be critical for us. We'll have a team dedicated to that, to bring back the loot that has been sent out of this country, as was done in Nigeria some years ago. So there is no doubt that we would deal with the expenditure side and we would deal with the revenue side, and there will be enough revenue, there will be policy credibility, and there will be enough cash flow to support borrowing from the capital markets again. And Ghana will be able to enter the international capital markets when we are in office.
Very interesting. And then I want to take you to the matter of exports. And this is an interesting proposal coming from you, the establishment of an accelerated export development council, which former president himself says he will preside over. What is the use of this particular body?
The manifesto, as it was detailed, tells you that we are looking to move away from import substitution to an export-led growth. Now, this is not a new concept. It's been talked about, but successive governments have not really done it much, except the JDM government, which pushed agro-processing, agribusiness, if you recall. 2014 to 2016, there was a lot of push on that front. We looked at even the cassava plants, in fact, not only the cassava plants, but cashew and other plants, and looked at how these could have benefits from the value chain approach. so that you would now have the farmers, you have the aggregators, you will have in industry those who will be processing these. Then they'll have longer shelf life. Then they can be exported. They can be used for raw materials, for export, and even for domestic industry, and also to achieve food security. And so on our return, we'll make sure that that happens. And that is why we are saying that the president at that time will chair the Accelerated Exports Commission to make sure that export-led growth is actually implemented. And that has also been detailed under the 40-year plan that we had before we left. And it will be executed in a manner to make Ghana self-reliant and be able to have good food security and also have enough natural resources or natural raw materials for our own industry and to buffer even our own currency. Because when you are able to do that and you reduce import substitution, there's no doubt that some of the benefits is that your currency then becomes stronger than it is now. Of course, we don't want an over-strong currency because we are seeking to do export-led growth. But a currency that is reasonable and a currency that is not in shambles as we see today. And also then there will be implications for the central bank. As we know, the central bank has to be recapitalized. The central bank is broke, which is a really unfortunate situation. But work will be done to resolve all those issues. So our manifesto is not one of promises, but of action plans.
And I'll come back to the central bank before we conclude this conversation. One of the things you're promising, and under when you were Deputy Finance Minister, Deputy to Honorable Sir Tepe, one of the things you did was, even with the Terminal 3, you got the airport company use their balance sheet, among others, to get some loans to start the project. These are things you did because these SOEs were in pretty good shape. Before leaving office, were the SOEs maybe moving towards debt under your watch?
The SOEs were not moving towards debt under our control. As you have rightly said, we got GAPOHA together with MPS to help decongest the port by expanding the port, and that happened. We supported them through tax exemptions, and that was government's equity towards that project. A project that is very important, not only to grow the economy, but through trade and industry, is critical for the region, West African region, because you know the Ghana port is a strategic port for all of West Africa. So that was a very strategic move in terms of infrastructure development, decongesting the port and expanding it, and government supported it. So we did that. With respect to Ghana airports that you speak of, they could not borrow on their balance sheet at the time because they were still building up the balance sheet. But what we did was we supported them by allowing them to use the tax cash flows, airport taxes that would have come into the consolidated accounts. We allow them to use that as cash flows to support a loan to build Terminal 3. And today we are all enjoying the benefits of Terminal 3. So Terminal 3 was built under JDM's governance using taxpayers' money, yes. And Ghana Airport has done well. And I believe that, and I hope that when we do the forensic audit, we'll find that they have been servicing those debts and have not created a problem or a sham there. So, yes, we were doing that, and we were bringing the SOEs to a stage where they would at least break even or make some profit. Therefore, we set up KPIs for them, key performance indicators for all of them. And every year we would sit with them to check those KPIs to make sure that they were making progress. So we kept them on their toes. Since we left office, I really don't know what has been going on with those SOEs. But through the forensic audits, we will find out and we will get them back on track. And they will do well to support the growth of the economy whilst we are in government.
But that's a comprehensive work that will take more than 120 days, I believe. So what do you expect to do within the first 120 days under this particular agenda?
So I repeat, as I said initially, the first 120 days will be setting up, preparing for these action plans that we have in place. You cannot just come and jump into action. You have to first do your forensic audits, set up your committees with the expertise and skills, the correct skills to manage the issues. So the first 120 days will be days of preparation, setting up the committees, getting and recruiting the right personnel to tackle the issues, and out of the forensic audits, finding out what the problems are, identifying them, and then coming up with the solutions on how best to deal with them. I don't expect that Ghanaians will start to see recovery from the first 120 days. But the first 120 days will give Ghana the indication that everything is being set up to tackle the issues. That is what we call policy credibility. It will also give the international community the assurance that we are laying solid foundation in order to tackle the mess that we are coming to meet. The mess that Ghana is in right now, we will prepare to deal with it. Rules, regulations, laws that have to be passed, enabling environments that have to be set up, people, number one, first and foremost, people who will have to work on these things. Some we already have, and we will be leaning on the youth who are experienced also, because a lot of the youth now have finished school, they've been working for some time. And one of the key things we'll be looking for is creativity, because creativity impacts quality leadership and will bring prosperity. So a lot of the youth will be part of our new government who will be working on many of these things. As JDM said, we will not have many ministers, but we will have the requisite number of skilled people who will be creative and who will be implementers of many of these action plans as we solve these issues. So the first 120 days will be for preparation, for setting up the framework, for doing the forensic audits, and getting the solutions ready for execution.
Well, I have to let you go, but since I have you on the line, one thing you mentioned Cocoa Board. Cocoa Board is not happy about the suggestion that they are only raising revenue internally because they're struggling to get the syndicated loan. In fact, this is what they say. The assertion they refer to the minority because they held a press conference on the same issue, that the international banks have rejected the Ghana Cocoa Board's request, and that Cocoa Board was, quote, chased away from the market is false. This is so because syndicated banks submitted term sheets in response to Cocoa Board's earlier request for proposals for consideration. Indeed, notwithstanding our intention to win off syndicated transactions, we still have committed contracts that need to be fulfilled through the syndicated process. These transactions have necessitated a discussion with financial institutions, and nothing in this process indicates to us a lack of confidence in Cocoa Board's credit worthiness from these financial institutions. What do you say to that response?
Simple. Money has a cost. And if today you come to me to borrow 10 cedis and the interest was formerly 1 cedi, and it was easy for you to pay me back my 11 cedis, you would do it. But if you came today because I no longer trust you, you no longer have integrity or credibility, and I now tell you that my interest is now 5 cedis, can you still afford to borrow $10 from me or 10 cedis from me? You cannot. So those term sheets must necessarily be given. When you request a term sheet, you will get it. And when you get it, it will tell you whether you can borrow or not. And that was what they got. So please, let's end it there. Bottom line, they were not able to borrow, and they'll have to find internal sources to purchase cocoa seeds.
And let me conclude with this on this note. Sunday, the vice president actually held a meet the press. And one of the things that came up, because in 2016, when you were deputy finance minister, one of the things you had on your back, one of the people you had on your back constantly was the vice president calling you incompetent, calling you failures, among others. 8 years on, he says, look at everything. We've done better than the John Dramani Mahama government. How do you respond to that, especially in the wake of consistent suggestions by your party that there's no way he could say that this government is doing better than yours.
I no longer listen to that man and that vice president. He has no credibility, so I don't listen to him. But what I would say is that the story tells it all. When we were in government, we delivered. There was no sign of incompetence. We delivered, and they benefit from the results because they showed numbers that were strong in 2017. And that was from our heavy lifting. So there's no doubt about our competence. And I think Ghanaians know that after this 8-year story. After this 8 years, Ghanaians now know who is who. And they know that we are competent. We can do the job. And they know that the party that has ruled for the last 8 years is totally incompetent, totally corrupt. So I have nothing to say in response to that gentleman, except to say that the fruits that they have borne have shown who they really are. And it is now up to Ghanaians to come out and vote them out of office and bring the competent people into office to run this nation and to take the nation to the bright future that it always will have.
It's a pleasure talking to you, madam, and I wish you all the best. As Madam Quartey, who is former Deputy Finance Minister, joining us on the line. We're talking about the 120-day agenda. Just took his views on it, her views on a few other issues. Well, if you just join us, one more thing. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Our guest is actually not in yet. When he gets here, we'll have our conversation. In the meantime, upgrade your home with the latest and most luxurious appliances from PMP at 21 Enterprise. Whether you're looking for kitchen gadgets, home entertainment systems, or essential household appliances, we got everything you need under one roof. PMP at 21 Enterprise stocks appliances from the most trusted brands in the market, the top brands. We also have a wide selection of electronic appliances from smart TVs, smartphones, and refrigerators to blenders and air conditioners. We have it all. And on offer, affordable prices. You have the choice of enjoying wholesale and retail options to suit your budget. You can find PMP at 21 Enterprise. Adjacent local government, Latibi Okoshi, Accra. Call them on this number 054 8483 930 or 059 52 46 963. Don't miss out on bringing